Hello, and welcome to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science, where we're going to take a look at whether or not grass lawns are really green and ask the question, can lawns be ecologically sustainable in the 21st century? So like many of these ethical dilemmas in science, this is based on a recent news account, and this one is no different. And so we're taking a look at an article that appeared in CNN in August 2022, where regions of drought-stricken California are paying homeowners up to $6 a square foot to tear up, to basically remove their traditional green grass lawns and replace it with something that is more drought resistant in an effort to conserve water in this region. And California isn't the only one facing these issues. We can see again in articles that have come out in August of 2022. Scottsdale, Arizona is looking at using incentives to get homeowners to reduce the watering of these traditional grass lawns and replace it with more desert-friendly, drought-resistant plants and or structures, maybe putting in rock gardens with a few drought-resistant plants associated with that. In 2021, Las Vegas became one of the first cities in the United States to outright outlaw grass lawns. And it's not all grass lawns. Taking a look at what's going on in Las Vegas right now, early on, about 20 years ago, 23 years ago now, in 1999, they began using an incentive program for homeowners to remove their lawns and limit watering. But what happened in 2021, again, in response to decreased water flow through the Colorado River, this massive drought that the American West is in right now, Las Vegas is attempting to replace the ornamental lawns in areas that are low use, so grass that is seldom walked on, and so like the median strips in a road adjacent to sidewalks and buildings, basically removing those and replacing them with more drought-resistant, desert-friendly landscaping. Okay, so before we look at the issues associated with the traditional grass lawn, let's try to understand where the lawn comes from. And so what we can see is that the American traditional grass lawn is also seen around the world. You can travel around the world and see these green grass lawns, green grass areas, tightly cropped, mowed fairly consistently, lush green environment in areas all around the world. And it's thought about originally from the European lawns of the 1800s as, kind of showing man's power over nature. Within the United States, there was an effort to attract homeowners from urban environments into the suburbs, and they wanted to have these suburban homes to have more of a natural feel, kind of a back to nature feel associated with it. So if you look at most homes in the suburbs, they're going to be set back from the road, and the space between the road and the home is filled with this lush green lawn. And so if we take a look at it within the suburbs, we take a look at it within the cities, within the urban green areas, grass lawns and individual homeowners' plots of land can account for 70 to 75% of the land. Now, in addition to these private lawns, there are also playgrounds, parks, cemeteries, golf courses. All in total, it's estimated that within the United States, there's over 163,000 square kilometers of lawn, and this corresponds to roughly the equivalent of the combined land space, the land mass of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts. Now, it's important to recognize that the grasses that are used in our traditional lawns aren't natural. They aren't native to the United States. They're actually imported from Europe. And because of that, even though we have these natural ecosystems that are similar to lawns in the form of meadows and prairies, we've got these European grasses that we're attempting to grow, and these grasses are not necessarily suited to our environment, and they're not sustainable. We have to support them by adding lots of water, we have to add fertilizer, we have to do a lot of things to maintain the lawn. Now, before we get into the problems associated with the lawn, I want to encourage that there are advantages associated with it. The presence of green spaces, both in the suburbs as well as urban areas, are very important for a whole variety of things. If we take a look at rainwater drainage, the presence of vegetation like grass or other green spaces can control up to about 60% of the runoff, and in doing so, improve flood control. It can reduce erosion. So if you look at areas that have impermeable surfaces, like a lot of asphalt, a lot of concrete covered spaces, they are going to have much higher levels of runoff and problems with floods, problems with erosion, and all that occurring. Green spaces are also good for noise reduction. It's good evidence showing that the presence of these green spaces have a local microclimate effect. The evaporation of water from these plants has a cooling effect for that area, and maintains a much cooler region than simply an asphalt or concrete paved area. It has air filtering, so it can remove particulate matters, air pollution, as well as producing oxygen. And then the growing of the grass is also capable of sequestering carbon dioxide, so preventing carbon dioxide from getting into the environment. This is especially true if the grass clippings are allowed to serve as mulch in that grass, and so they're not disposed of and sent to a landfill in some place. Now, it's important to keep in mind that any carbon that is sequestered through the growing of the grass is often going to be offset by the emissions associated with fossil fuel powered lawnmowers. Now, in addition to all that, there are some aesthetic, recreational, and cultural values associated with these green spaces. Now, lots of good studies have come out, a couple systematic reviews where they've looked at a whole variety of other types of studies and combined all of those results to get a broader understanding of the impact of green spaces on health, mental health, and physical health. And a number of studies have shown that there is a pretty good association with the presence of green spaces to be able to get out and get into nature, or at least to see nature, or at least a natural environment. These green spaces is very, very important in reducing stress. It is promoting both physical and mental health of children, adolescents, adults, as well as the elderly. And so there are benefits associated with these green spaces. Now, if we take a look at these green spaces, again, focusing in on these traditional grass lawns that are very well kept, the maintenance costs, the maintenance burden associated with maintaining these grass lawns is estimated to be more than commercial agriculture within the United States. If you take a look at frequent mowing, it's estimated that about 200 million gallons of gasoline are used each year within the United States with gas-powered lawnmowers. And it's important to recognize that these gas lawnmowers probably aren't as kind of ecologically efficient. It's not going to have the emission controls. In many cases, they're not as finely tuned up as your automobile. And so a mile per mile basis, a lawnmower is producing about 11 times more pollution than a car. As I said, the traditional green grass lawn isn't native to the United States, and so we need to treat it with herbicides and pesticides, estimated in the realm of about 62,000 tons annually, and this was 10 years ago, so it's probably gone up from then. And these pesticides and herbicides basically kill generally insect species or plant species, weeds that are attempting to grow in that area, and they will often wash off of the lawns and run into streams and lakes where they could have the effect of potentially killing other important resident plants and animals. Again, we need to fertilize the lawns because they're going to be using up the nutrients, and by not rotating the crops or at least allow the mulching to occur, we need to add nutrients back onto the soil. The nutrients, again, can get into the water supply and can contribute to kind of abnormal growth of algae within ponds, lakes, and regions like that. and these algal blooms can cause a lot of problems to the native species, and they basically can kill off native species in the lakes, and they can kill off fish as well. In addition to that, and what triggered the movement to replace green lawns with other sustainable green spaces is the watering effect. Looked at a variety of statistics associated with it, but the best statistics, the most recent statistics I can find, are about 3 trillion gallons of water per year are used to irrigate lawns within the United States as of a paper that came out in 2021. And in some areas of the United States, this accounts for about 75% of the annual water consumption. So more than what we would be using within our households by, drinking water, water for cleaning, water for showers, bathing, things like that. A huge impact on these water supplies. And it's important to recognize that water that is used within the house is going to go into the sewer system. It'll go through a water reclamation process and essentially can be recycled, where water that is added outside of the house, watering of these grass lawns, is going to get up into the atmosphere and evaporate, and a very small amount of that is going to get back into the groundwater system. And so there are, kind of the effects of draining water out of aquifers and water reservoirs for many of these urban as well as suburban environments. So what we can see is that there's now a greater move towards naturescaping, this native, ecologically, eco-friendly green spaces within both urban environments as well as the suburbs. Now, the goal of naturescaping is an effort to replace part or all of our traditional green grass lawns with an ecologically friendly alternative. And so this may mean going to native plants that are better at growing within the environment. And so because they're growing in that environment, they're going to need less materials added to them to promote their growth. It may mean going to less grass or grass-free lawns, using rock gardens and things like that. We can use low-maintenance ground cover, things that will suppress weeds, but still aerate the soil and provide habitats for natural organisms. Something as simple as clover, which is recognized as a weed in most green grass lawns, is important because it's going to add nutrients back to the soil. In addition, we can replace fertilizer by using compost. So instead of sending these organic materials to the waste supply system to go into landfills and be buried, we allow the nutrients to be recycled into the ground. Now, if we take a look at this, there are a lot of ecological values associated with these naturescaping areas. One of the first things that we can see is that the reduction of mowing can result in significant increases in the native species, in both insects as well as native plant species. And we see that occurring whether we're talking about a traditional green grass lawn or kind of using more native environments. And so there are many efforts to reduce the frequency of mowing. There seems to be a pretty good evidence that instead of mowing once a week, you mow once every other week, so mow once every 2 weeks. You can increase the biodiversity within an area and see a dramatic increase in the number of insect pollinators that are important. Now, this is going to come at odds with many zoning laws that are based on fire safety, rodent control, regulation or reduction of noxious weeds, as well as neighbors' concerns of property values. There's this effort to kind of regulate and kind of maintain this common aesthetic associated with these green grass lawns. And this gives rise to our ethical dilemma in science for this week. Should sustainable and natural green spaces replace traditional grass lawns? And I'm not talking about a whole-scale kind of complete replacement of grass lawns, but a significant reduction in these traditional grass lawns. And within this, kind of 3 sub-questions. How do you overcome the cultural inertia associated with these traditional grass lawns, seeing the power of man over nature? What issues should be considered in adjusting zoning laws to support sustainable natural green spaces as an option over traditional green lawns? And then finally, given the ecological costs, should incentives be available to individual homeowners to replace traditional green lawns, even in currently drought-free regions? We're seeing it occurring in areas where we have limited amounts of water, but there are still significant ecological costs associated with our traditional green grass lawns. So should these sustainable and natural green spaces replace traditional grass lawns? So thank you for listening to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science. We'll have another one next week. Please see the description below for additional information and the references that I used in preparing this talk. So thank you and have a great week.